Sego, it is Monday, May 28th, which means it is actually my sixth grandchild's sixth birthday. I want to wish Trenton Kane a happy sixth birthday. Look, I want to welcome you to Let's Talk Native on the LTN Radio Network. This program breaks all the rules for Native radio. No buffalo speeches, no mystic healing, no special Indian prayers. We tackle the real issues facing Native people. We'll look back at our glorious and our grave history, a tough look at where we're at now, and look forward to our ongoing battles for sovereignty and autonomy. Let's Talk Native is produced in association with Iroquois Promotions on the LTN Radio Network, streaming live from the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation and simulcast on the Gwe. That's CKWE in Tandanega. You can find us at www.ltnradionet.com. And, of course, we are streaming live on Facebook. I am John Kane. I'm the show's host and producer. And, look, I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to get a chance to talk with you and go a little deeper into some of my my Twitter and Facebook activity this week. Since the last show, I was posting a bit during the weekend, and a couple of things have been going on for several days, including the NFL taking an aggressive action towards those who wish to take a knee during the national anthem during football games, prohibiting it actually, and prohibiting it to the point where they will fine teams and fine players and whatever other measures they plan to take. So I posted a few things. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Star Spangled Banner in general. I think that people are unfamiliar with its origins, unfamiliar with its the writer of the poem that would become the national anthem, and they're pretty unfamiliar with the language that's actually in there. So we'll discuss some of that. And of course, I did mention last week I talked about a bit of an inspiration I got from an Egyptian activist. She's a feminist, a medical doctor, somebody who speaks her mind. Her name is Dr. Nawal El Sadawi. I listened to her on Hard Talk, which is an NPR, carried on NPR. It's a BBC, I think, broadcast. And, she mentioned, as she was being pressed in this interview about democracy and whether Egypt is more democratic now or more of a democracy now than it was, under previous leadership. She raised the issue about the problems with democracy, and she said democracy does not exist under capitalism or under a dominant religion. So I posted a meme about that too. So we'll talk about all of those things, and that's kind of what'll shape the show. But I figure having a conversation about some of these things. I mean, look, you post a meme, and it's a few words here and there. It's it evokes a response, and I have been engaged in a number of pretty good conversations, I guess. Some of them, get a little bit harsh, and part of it isn't even my memes. It's a response to some of the other narratives that are going on there. But let me get started. First off, the Star Spangled Banner. I think it's worth noting, and this is a meme that I posted. I said it's worth noting that the only enemy called out or deaths called for in the Star Spangled Banner, and it is a war song, right? The only ones that are called out are those of slaves fighting for their freedom. So, I mean, if you don't know the Star Spangled Banner, then you're completely unfamiliar with what I'm talking about. But first, Francis Scott Key was a slaveholder. He came from affluence. His family had a fairly long tradition of slave ownership, slaveholding. And one of the things that clearly got under his skin wasn't just this notion of being attacked by Great Britain in the War of 1812 in that era, but the fact that Great Britain was already changing its position about slavery and realizing that it was inappropriate. It was probably never appropriate, but Great Britain was already taking a position against the slave trade, as were many European countries. And I'm not saying that to give them credit, because let's face it, that's where the practice started in the first place. But along with that, Great Britain was offering freedom to slaves that would fight alongside them against the Americans, who were really committed to slavery, because look, they saw the opportunities that slave labor and the theft of native lands would represent, and they all saw it. Washington, Jefferson, Adams, they all saw this stuff, and so what Francis Scott Key put into his poem, and of course everybody knows the first verse, right? Well, I take it back. I'll say everybody knows the first verse, but I've never heard a song that is always messed up as often as the Star Spangled Banner. But the first verse, "Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that Star-Spangled Banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave." Now, just that last line, to throw the line in there about the land of the free from a guy who was a staunch advocate for slavery, so much so that when you skip down and in case you didn't know, there's like 4 verses to this poem, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but none of them call out England. None of them call out the enemy. Although they do call out, it is called out a group that was fighting with the enemy, and this is the 3rd verse. So I'm gonna read it to you here. Put my glasses on so I can make sure I get it right here. And so it starts out, "And where is that band who so vauntingly swore?" Now that band means it was a special detachment fighting for the British that were slaves fighting for their freedom. But this is a verse in the Star-Spangled Banner. "And where is that band who so vauntingly swore that the havoc of war and the battle's confusion, a home and a country should leave us no more? Their blood has washed out their foul footsteps' pollution. No refuge could save the hiring enslaved from the terror of flight or the gloom of the grave. And the Star-Spangled Banner in triumph doth wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave." I mean, the hypocrisy of a verse that is actually calling not just for the death of slaves fighting for the freedom, but death in such a capacity that their blood would wash out their foul footsteps. I mean, that's the language. I mean, look, if you're going to turn a poem into the national anthem, then perhaps the real imagery of what this the writer was trying to capture should be. I mean, look, bombs bursting in air. Look, and everybody, they play that, and then they light off fireworks, like somehow fireworks and bombs are the same thing, right? But no, when you get down to the 3rd verse, you realize that this guy, the only death and blood that he was calling for in this poem was for slaves, the hiring and slave. I mean, look, it's worth noting. It's worth noting because as we get into this this battle over NFL players, which started with Colin Kaepernick taking a knee, not over condemning the flag or even the national anthem. I mean, Colin Kaepernick wasn't protesting the fact that the 3rd verse of the Star-Spangled Banner is racist. No, he wasn't protesting that. He wasn't even protesting the fact that the writer of the Star-Spangled Banner was a slaveholder. I mean, let's face it, they all were. Washington, Jefferson wasn't just a slaveholder. He raped his slaves. I mean, his slaves were sex slaves as well. So I mean, we can get into that conversation another time. But what Colin Kaepernick began first sitting and then taking a knee to was the incredible amount of death that was playing out in the media every single day, it seemed, with unarmed people of color being killed by police officers and no convictions. And I don't mean just police officers, perhaps being a little overzealous with their trigger finger. I mean, in the case of Eric Garner, we're talking about somebody who was choked to death. Whatever happened to Sandra Bland, who got pulled over supposedly for a taillight and ends up dead in her jail cell. Why she would be in a jail cell for a taillight is bizarre. But I mean, a 12-year-old kid in Tamir Rice being shot because he was playing with his airsoft gun that he got for Christmas. I mean, that's what Colin Kaepernick was taking a knee for. Now, he took the knee during the national anthem because of some of the language that's in the national anthem, and he took the knee while everybody's honoring the flag, because what the flag is supposed to represent isn't true, and it certainly isn't the land of the free if you can have a right to kill be backed up by courts and be backed up by judges and be backed up by legislation. So that's what Colin Kaepernick wasn't protesting the flag or the national anthem. And in fact, when he first started sitting out the national anthem during the preseason, I might add, he consulted with a veteran, and he said, "Look, here's what I'm trying to do." And the veteran supported what he was doing, and he said, "But perhaps so it doesn't look like you are totally disrespecting the flag, take a knee." I mean, taking a knee is kind of a sign of respect, more respect than I'd be giving that flag or the national anthem. But that's what Colin Kaepernick did, and it got met with just a tirade of white people just being pissed off because a black man would dare do something that in their mind disrespected their flag, even though that wasn't the purpose. So now you have the NFL, who was actually considering, first, throwing a flag, literally throwing a flag, and putting a 15-yard, inflicting a 15-yard penalty against a team that would not stand for the national anthem. Now, keep in mind, this is a football game. This isn't a civics class. This isn't, swearing allegiance to the, to the state or anything else. No, this is a football game. And why the national anthem has to be played at any of these events, including graduations and Little League baseball games. Why does a imposed patriotism have to be a part of a sporting event? I mean, they don't play the national anthem at a theater. I mean, they don't play it at any number of other types of social gatherings. But all of a sudden, you've got first off the military throwing a bunch of money to promote recruitment and that kind of stuff at the NFL, at baseball, at NASCAR. I mean, all of that stuff. I mean, it's crazy. When I go to a lacrosse game, which is our sport, right? They don't play anything. They got a guy with bagpipes for some reason. A guy with bagpipes playing at a lacrosse game. So a bagpipe guy comes down, and then they play the Canadian national anthem and the American national anthem. And there is nothing that suggests in the slightest way that this is a sport that is ours, that it comes from our origins, so to speak. No, nothing. But again, my view about the national anthem and the standing for the flag and pledging to the flag and saluting the flag and all that other stuff comes from a little different place, certainly a different place than Colin Kaepernick's does. But so there you have the NFL who now says that they're going to fine players and teams if they don't step, or what they said is you can stay in the locker room. You can just don't come out on the field. So, I mean, the question is, how much does the NFL own these guys and their behavior? And should there be some sort of forced or patriotism forced upon these guys? Or not even, it wouldn't really be patriotism. Are they supposed to display patriotism as a part of being a football player? I mean, is that even right? I'm not saying is it legal. I mean, there are all kinds of debates on whether the NFL gets to control every action of an NFL player beyond the performance as an athlete. I mean, just on the sidelines. I mean, how much does the NFL get to control all that stuff? And is this appropriate? I had one of my friends on Facebook posted a meme, and it showed all those white supremacists there in Virginia there that were doing their rally for white supremacy. And as a picture of that, and then I had a picture below it of NFL players taking a knee. And the question in the meme was, if you think this image of white supremacists holding a rally is merely an expression of freedom of speech, but have a problem with NFL players, with the second picture, NFL players taking, if you have a problem with that, then you're a racist. And I don't think that's a terrible leap to make. If you think it's fine that white supremacists have rallies, but have trouble with a black man taking a knee during the national anthem, and sure enough, there some white guy took the bait, right? And he says, well, those white supremacists, they were doing that on their own time. These football players, they were doing it on my time. I pay their salaries, and they're doing it on my dime. And I said, there you go, you're a racist. And he goes, what do you mean I'm a racist? And he was outraged. How dare you call me racist? Well, you took the bait. You defended the white supremacists, and you condemned the black athletes taking a knee. The rules are clear. If you're okay with this but not okay with this, then you're a racist. And you took the bait, so yes, you're a racist. Not just because you took the bait. You were obviously a racist before you took the bait. But I mean, this idea that somebody who buys a ticket to a game somehow has purchased the behavior of an athlete. I mean, how absurd is that? And look, there's all kinds of white people that jumped all over these pages. Steve Kerr, the basketball coach, former Chicago Bull player and basketball coach for the Golden State Warriors, weighed in on what a stupid decision this was by the NFL and how weak it was and how they're pandering to their white base, because the vast majority of football fans are white people. I mean, that's, it is kind of, it's right up there with NASCAR for many people. It has got that, even though 75% of the premier athletes in the NFL are black, the people who think that those black men have to play for them are white, the vast majority. And so it is clearly along racial lines, the white people who are outraged that a black man would dare take a knee during the national anthem. And yet, the funny thing is, that same guy who weighed in and then seemed outraged that that he passed the racist test, that same guy never once suggested that that the waving of American flags at a white supremacy rally was problematic. See, that didn't bother him. At first he tried to say, look, I don't care what these guys are protesting. They're doing it on my dime, and that's the problem I have. And then he later gets into his exchange on how, and I don't need these guys disrespecting my flag. Well, what about those white supremacists who were hanging a Confederate flag and Nazi flag right alongside an American flag? That didn't bother you? You had nothing to say about that. And, of course, the bigger problem is that you have nothing to say about a 12-year-old kid being killed for playing with his airsoft gun because he's black. And the police never asked him to put the weapon down, or never talked him down. It's funny. A white kid can go into a school and shoot up 10, 20, 30 kids, and somehow they always seem to be able to take them into custody, unless they shoot themselves, unless they commit suicide first. All these guys who can walk into a movie theater, or they can walk into a public place, including a school, elementary school, or a middle school or a high school. The police never seem to have to fire a shot to kill these guys, on sight like they did Tamir Rice. Tamir Rice, a 12-year-old kid, all by himself on a park, because and I'm sure it was a white person who said, I think there's a black man with a gun. And it was a kid, a 12-year-old kid. So they show up there with their guns drawn, and within seconds, shoot the kid dead. Then 45 minutes pass before they even call in any kind of ambulance or EMTs to give him medical attention. So the kid died. See, that doesn't offend these white men who again seem to be devoid of any real conscience when it comes to what is being protested. Instead, they're gonna follow Trump's lead and say, "Oh no, yeah, these guys, what do you do? You call them sons of bitches? They should be dragged off the field. They should be fired." I mean, Trump suggested now that not only should they be fined, but they should be expelled from the country or something like that. I mean, yeah, that's your fearless leader. Look, here's something else that I posted, and it covers all of this stuff, and it starts with just a simple very beginning of Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech from 1963, and it starts as I still have a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. One day this nation will rise up and live up to its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. I have a dream. That's just the beginning of Martin Luther King's speech from 1963. What I added to that was 55 years later, that dream has not been realized. That creed has not been lived up to, nor is there liberty and justice for all or a land of the free. So when these words are read, sung, or pledged, how are those who know that this is a lie, or at very least an unrealized dream, supposed to act? Are those who see no equality or justice or freedom supposed to stand and honor rhetoric and propaganda that many have no intentions of ever letting become real? Or do they say, hell no, I'll not stand for a song written by a slave owner with words about freedom in it, and I'll not pledge allegiance to a flag that does not represent liberty and justice for me? So that was one of the other posts. Now, these are things that, again, I've been busy on Facebook, and I've been busy on Twitter, because I don't think these things get put into their proper perspective. I mean, it is really easy for a white man to say, no, I just oppose these guys kneeling for the flag, and then claim that it's not race-based, even though the test was, if you're okay with white supremacists, holding the rally, but you're offended by this, then you're a racist. I mean, and then when you delve into it and you have a conversation and you go back and forth with these guys, you realize how much their stories change, and then how to recast it. I mean, the idea that because somebody buys a ticket to a football game, and let's be clear here, your ticket does not buy you the behavior of a player. You're not paying his salary even. The vast majority of dollars that go into that the NFL makes doesn't come from your ticket sales at a stadium. It comes from television rights. It comes from advertisers. It comes from the millions of dollars paid for a Super Bowl ad. It comes from any number of ways, and down low on that list is that ticket you paid for your nosebleed seats with 50,000 other drunk white men. No, that's not where that's not what pays their salary. It may cover part of the expense of using the stadium, but you didn't buy the behavior. And you know what? What are those athletes paid for? I mean, yeah, they may be paid some, maybe a little extra for doing some PR work for the NFL, but they're paid to be athletes, to play the game, to perform, to show up and be in good shape, and to perform at a premier athletic level. And you know what? And if they can't perform well enough, they don't get rehired. But that's not the only thing that could get you fired from the NFL. If again, this is where politics and race comes in. Colin Kaepernick hasn't played for, this will be the second season that he will not have played at all. Why? Because he took a knee during a flag during the national anthem. But I think it's important to realize that what King was saying in 1963 is that he hoped that one day the nation would live up to its creed. That all that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Well, sorry, Martin Luther King, MLK, it didn't happen. 55 years later, it isn't realized. Look, and it's funny because Americans, white and black, will play that speech. Because why? It makes them feel good. Because it makes it sound like this is a dream that's achievable. And even racists will, I mean, I guess the most staunch racists would be offended by any words coming out of a black man that makes that makes a public statement. But I think most people could appreciate that speech. To be judged by the content of your character and not by the color of your skin, Sorry, Martin, didn't happen. Still hasn't happened yet. And in fact, the color of your skin, even when you have something, an exclusive talent, like to be a premier athlete. I mean, even if you have that, an exceptional skill, a marketable skill, the color of your skin is going to weigh in. And don't you dare use your celebrity to promote a cause that might offend white people. I mean, and the fact that even some of these athletes themselves find themselves in precarious situations with police. And I'm not talking about the athletes who beat their women and do these terrible things. They should have, or get caught with weapons or, shoot themselves in the leg or like the Giants player did or whatever. Look, and in fact, ironically, the NFL has less of a problem with those things, with the guy who beats his girlfriend in an elevator or whatever. Some of these premier athletes, even if they're black, if they beat their wives, Warren Moon, it's okay. As long as he performs well for us. And as long as he doesn't make a public statement that's going to offend a bunch of white people, like taking a knee during the national anthem. I mean, this is the bizarre nonsense of all this stuff. So I posted another meme, and it was kind of a takeoff on a previous meme that I posted. The previous meme was, racism is so American that when people of color protest racism, white people think we're protesting America. But I had to change it. So this is the meme that I got posted. If you see it on my Facebook group pages, you'll see it. Racism is so American that when people of color protest racism, the NFL thinks we're protesting America. And it's true. I mean, this whole thing, I mean, the overture that the NFL commissioner put out there, and of course Trump weighing in on, was all about the disrespect that these guys were showing, not taking into account at all what the protest is really about. And look, a silent, peaceful, and respectful protest. So no, I won't stand up. I'm gonna take a knee and I'm gonna bow my head while the song is playing until you make the words of that song true, which is always going to be difficult considering who wrote the song and what the rest of the words are. I mean, that's problematic enough. But until the country lives up to its creed, that all men are created equal, I don't know. I think it's absolutely appropriate to take a knee. And I hope that these NFL players show enough courage and challenge it. Not just challenge it in terms of fighting the penalties and the fines, but you know what? Take a knee anyway. Do what you got to do to utilize what's going on. Because look, the NFL is the only major sports league. I mean, forget about NASCAR, but I mean, as far as a sport, football, basketball, baseball, it's the only sport where this would be pushed like this, because the NFL is catering to a bunch of rednecks, and that's the bottom line. But I want to talk more deeply about this stuff because, again, going back and forth with some of these folks who want to try to make their solid argument, and the guy who again said, well, those guys at the white supremacy rally, they did that on their own time. For one thing, you don't know that. You don't know how many of these guys were collecting a salary or working for a company that perhaps is subsidized by your tax dollars. You don't know that. You just assumed it was. And again, you can say that, I don't support that. But that's not what you said. You said that's okay because they did it on their time, not on time that you think you're paying for with your ticket price. Just bizarreness, man. Just absolute bizarreness. Look, we're at the bottom of the hour. We'll take a break when we come back. I got to get into a little bit more of, again, some of the other things that I posted, and we'll get back to it right after this. We'll take a break with maybe a little Murray Porter.
How many years must it go on? How many tears must we cry? And how many promises are broken? How many more little white lies? Little white lies. Little white lies. Little white lies. Little white lies. Keep on telling me the little white lies. Keep on telling me the little white lies. Teach your children in the classroom English, history. What do they teach about the Indians? Took us prisoner in your fight to be free. Little white lies. Little white lies. Little white lies. Little white lies. Keep on telling.
Wednesday, May 30th at 7 p.m. at the Brooklyn Commons.
They say this land isn't a place to live, it's a place to leave. Then why do people stay?
You're adopted?
Yeah. My real parents died in a car crash when I was 7. I'm here looking for my biological family.
Who it is?
Felicia from Facebook.
Oh, hey, girl.
What are you up to?
Just waiting for you to call.
I knew your family. If I lived under the conditions they did, I probably would have drank myself to death, too.
You know, what we look for and what we get aren't always the same thing.
I'm doing the best that I can.
Oh, this is you at your best? Is that what you're telling me?
No.
Maybe my family is a bunch of drunks, but I will be the one to judge that. Me.
Join WBI host John Kane for a free screening of Drunktown's Finest here at the Commons, 388 Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn, New York, Wednesday, May 30th at 7 p.m. All right, thanks for coming back. This is John Kane, and this is Let's Talk Native. Look, I am screening Drunktown's Finest in New York at the Brooklyn Commons. That's 388 Atlantic Avenue. That's the media center attached to the cafe on the ground floor of the Brooklyn Commons, which is also the building that hosts WBAI upstairs. So we will be screening that film. It's a free screening. We will accept donations for WBAI. We show films and then we have a conversation about them and about what the film addresses or implies, and this should be a good one. This one tackles some tough issues and issues probably that people aren't aware of. So anyway, it'll be a good opportunity to see a film that you may not have had the chance to see and may not be aware of. So we'll come on out and we'll share a film and we'll have a conversation. Look, let me go ahead and give my props to my sponsors. I want to thank Ross and Holly John and the RJE Family of Businesses, Eric White and ERW Enterprises. I want to thank Legacy 420, and I want to thank Mike General, and who owns Mikey G's and Mikey's Emporium and a few other facilities, stores in Seneca Nation territory. I also want to thank a couple of friends who do some make some donations from time to time that certainly help out. Guys like Ed Schindler and Cynthia Trice and Roger Jock, my good friend Neville Spring. And I want to thank those of you who've helped in the past, because we are getting into our 9th year here and doing this for 9 years. We were doing a 2-hour show, and then we broke it up into 2 1-hour shows. But we've been doing 2 hours of radio for a good long time here, and we couldn't have done it without your support, either those who have supported in the past or those who continue to support us. So I thank you all for joining in the fight and doing your part. Look, I also want to thank Unity Stream and Apache Radio Net for providing our streaming, and I want to thank CKWE for their simulcast and the rebroadcast of the show. And I also want to thank some of the internet networks, Netroots Radio, Real People's Media, and Indigenous Resistance Radio for carrying Let's Talk Native on their networks. I also want to thank those who share the show, whether you're sharing the Facebook live stream or you're sharing our SoundCloud audio or our YouTube videos. And, of course, along with those who share the show, especially my wife, Brenda, who shares the show on many of the Facebook group pages. I also have to thank the administrators of those Facebook group pages for allowing my video, audio, or whatever, perhaps even some of my memes, I guess, to grace your group pages and allow conversations to spread. That's what the show is about. This show, the intention is to, if not start conversations, but to promote conversations and keep the conversations going. So that's what we do here. That's the plan for the show. And, we try to address, issues in a way that may not be, this perspective is not being offered, put it that way. There's a lot of debate. There's a lot of debate over issues. And a lot of times people dig in on whether something is right or wrong, right or left or right, I guess, or conservative, liberal, or whatever. But the reality is, most of the answers to these conflicts lie somewhere in the middle, and most of it really is associated with just understanding that, look, there's a reason for an athlete, a black athlete, in a sport where they dominate that sport, which, black athletes dominate many sports. But for them to use that celebrity, to use what they have experienced, and a lot of times these are guys who, were fortunate to make it in a professional sport, but they feel like owe something back to where they come from, their neighborhood, their family, their friends, their relatives. And one of the ways they pay back isn't just to offer up, autographs, but it's to take a stand on injustice. And, and that's what guys like Muhammad Ali did when he refused to be drafted to go fight in Vietnam. I mean, something that universally people accepted was a mistake. But it took a premier athlete like Muhammad Ali to stand up and say, no, I'm not going to go fight these people. They've never done it. He goes, my enemy is you. You're the ones who oppress me, not a bunch of Viet Cong. I mean, it took somebody bold enough to say it. I mean, look, Martin Luther King gave some great speeches and inspired people. But, there was some tough talk that had to come from guys like Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali. And you know what? And from Colin Kaepernick, who is, really universally being praised by anybody in any kind of activist community. And in fact, as a premier athlete, as a quarterback, his ratings are higher than most of the NFL quarterbacks, and yet he's not being signed by any. Not being signed by any. So racism isn't something that that came with wrapped in a bow with Donald Trump's presidency. It's been here. It's been here. I mean, again, you think about King's comments, and what his comments really are reflecting is, how could we not in 1963? How could the United States still not have lived up to its creed, as he called it, that all men are created equal? I mean, these words were embedded in everything from their Declaration of Independence to to their Constitution. I mean, it's 240 years later now, 55 years after King still expressed it as a dream that this would no longer just be words on a paper, that it could actually be realized by human beings, all human beings, black human beings, people of color. 55 years later, still not there. And why? Look, it's racism, folks. It's just racism. And you know what? It isn't just the evangelical right. It isn't just the Republican Party. I mean, we get racist comments from a Democrat governor here in the state of New York. I mean, every time I hear somebody make the comment about, oh, this is a country of immigrants. And so who are they ignoring when they say that? First off, they're ignoring those of us who were here long before they showed up, but they're also ignoring the fact that several million black men were dragged in chains in the bottom of a boat. And it still continued even after it was illegal. I mean, they were looking for some boat that in Alabama or something like that that these guys tried to smuggle in the last African slaves that they were able to bring into the United States, and it made some news. It turns out the boat they discovered wasn't the right one, but I mean, the idea that in 1850. The number one asset for industry was black labor, was slave labor. I mean, so whether you were, a plantation owner, whatever, if you were a person of agriculture or industry, and agriculture was the big industry in the 19th century, the reason it was profitable was because you had slaves. And you know what? There was even programs that would pay these guys when they lost a slave. I mean, the amount of support. When people want to talk about welfare, they want to talk about, black people on welfare, which they don't even represent the lion's share of people, welfare recipients. But, when you think about corporate welfare, you should do an investigation on how much money went to plantation owners even as they were phasing out slavery. I mean, they were compensated. The fact that they made millions of dollars and that the country's affluence was born out of stolen land and stolen labor and stolen freedom, that's completely ignored. In fact, no, we're going to still compensate. I mean, look, the largest death toll from the ravages of war occurred when the United States was fighting itself. It only recently did all of the other wartime deaths, all of them, Revolutionary War, Vietnam, Korea, World War I, World War II, and now the Middle East. It only within the last couple of years did the deaths associated with military deaths finally surpass the total amount of deaths associated with the Civil War, a war fought over slavery, over the fight over slavery. I mean, and I'm not even getting into what Native people went through. 95% of our population wiped out, because of manifest destiny. White man's burden, doing God's work. That's how it was related. The doctrine of Christian discovery, it justified slavery and the theft of native land and the murdering of native people. The idea of reducing people who were not Christians to something subhuman. And then even when you do these conversions and you get black people to adopt Christianity and you get native people to adopt Christianity, they still don't become equal, not in the eyes of these white men, and apparently not in the eyes of God, because if there was really a just God, would he have allowed slavery to exist for all those years? Would he have allowed the massacres and again the slave trade, the massacres of native people? I mean, the rapes and murders of native people? Would a just God have done that? I mean, one of the early massacres that took place of the Lenape, the Lenape or Delaware, as they're sometimes called, in a place just west of Pittsburgh, what is now Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. A bunch of Moravian, so these were converted Lenapes. They were murdered by the colonists, by the revolutionary, by the Americans. They were murdered by them because they were afraid they were going to somehow show allegiance to the British. So when we talk about Francis Scott Key, talking about what's it? No refuge could save the hiring and slave from the terror of flight and the gloom of the grave. Their blood has washed out their foul footsteps pollution. So their footsteps were pollution that would be washed out by their own blood. I mean, so that's what he said of slaves, and that's the same treatment that was doled out to Native people. So when Donald Trump, as I mentioned in the last show, says, in order for America to move forward, it's got to be proud of its history. Yeah, you don't even know the history. And in fact, there's a perfectly good reason certainly for black athletes, but for anybody who is disturbed that 240 years after the United States declared its independence and adopted, all this rhetoric into their constitution about all men are created equal, and impose these pledges of allegiance, to 4 and 5 year olds in school, making them say it in school they're still saying it in school. They still do this. Liberty and justice for all? Really? No, not really. So, the question is it a lie? Or is it still, what's the language that Obama used when he talked about the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples? Oh, yeah, we endorse the aspiration of the agreement. So is this just an aspiration? Something that we hope for? Like Martin Luther King did 55 years ago? Just hope or dream that someday, the United States will live up to its creed. Well, I got to tell you, your hope and your dream and karma and all other stuff that people think, is going to affect change, didn't. It didn't. The murder of Martin Luther King, nope. The Civil Rights Act, nope, didn't change it. Didn't change this. It's still merely an aspiration. And you know what? It's not an aspiration held by everybody. If it was, then it would change. Then black men and people of color would not be subject to this injustice. A 12-year-old kid playing with an airsoft gun wouldn't have been killed by police in Cleveland. A man accused of having sold tax-free cigarettes in Staten Island would not have been choked to death with a bunch of other cops ganged up on top of him. Would not have been choked to death if there was liberty and justice for all. It doesn't exist. It's words on a paper. And, people say, oh, yeah, but it's in the Constitution, so it's law. No, it isn't. Because they create exceptions to this stuff. The courts have held that a police officer is justified in using deadly force if he thinks or feels that there's a danger. There doesn't have to be a real danger. There doesn't have to be an imminent threat. There doesn't have to be a weapon. All the police officer has to say was, well, in that moment that I choked Eric Garner, in that moment that I killed a 12-year-old boy in a park, in that moment, I had a fear. As a police officer, I had a fear that there was a public safety danger. That's all they have to do. It doesn't have to be a public safety. There doesn't have to be a real danger. They just have to feel like there was a threat of a danger. And the courts hold that up. And they hold it up every single time. Even here in Buffalo, again, there was a recent case where a police officer was exonerated for tripping a man with his hands cuffed behind his back, something that shouldn't have happened anyway because he hadn't done anything wrong. He was just a suspect. He cuffed him and then tripped him and made him smash his face on the pavement. And the defense was, oh no, he didn't do that. He's professionally trained. So the expert witness who said, oh no, this police officer was professionally trained was how this guy got off. I mean, look, this is the world that we live in. 240 years after words were written like, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. Well, maybe all men are created equal, but they aren't raised equal, are they? And as they become, even before they become adults, I mean, Tamir Rice might have been born equal, but he didn't die equal. No, he didn't die equal. Eric Garner didn't die equal. Freddie Gray didn't die equal. Castillo didn't die equal. I mean, none of these guys. I mean, it's, Mike Brown didn't die equal. Might have been born equal. They were created equal. They were created equal. They just weren't treated equal. So that's it. All men are created. They just aren't treated equal. So yeah, I'm going to keep posting, memes that, and you know what? If you get pissed off because of something you read that I wrote, or if I respond to something that you wrote, and it always cracks me up. The first time you call somebody a racist, oh, how dare you play the race card? How dare you? Really? When you demonstrate not just your white privilege, but your white fragility and your white supremacy in the way that you do. All right, I got to get to the last meme that I posted up, which I mentioned it last weekend, and I couldn't recall the name of the person who inspired this, but her name is Dr. Nawal El Sadawi. She's an Egyptian activist. She was a feminist. She's a medical doctor. I mean, her profession was to heal people. But I heard her speak of democracy because she was being pressed about democracy. She goes, democracy doesn't exist with capitalism. And she didn't say just religion. What she said is, when religion becomes a dominant force in a society, it can't coexist with democracy. I mean, and it's simple. I mean, if you can buy an election, if you can buy legislation and preferential, if money can do that, or even if money doesn't do it directly, even if it does it indirectly with all this, this Facebook and fake news and Russian influence. Look, money's behind that. Whether Donald Trump was legitimately elected or not, it's capitalism that allows an election to be subverted, either through, again, through the influence of money, campaign contributions, political action committees, and of course, lobbying in general. So not only does money affect who gets elected, because it's a rich guy who gets elected, regardless of which party. I mean, when people say, well, I voted for Trump because he was anti-establishment. Look, you don't become a wealthy person if you didn't play the game. I mean, look, of course you could inherit it, but he didn't maintain his wealth by not playing the game, by not being establishment. So rich guys are the ones who get elected. By the time you get to go to the voting booth, you've already, really good candidates, if there were such a thing, they've already been eliminated because it's only it's only the ones who are able to raise the money. The only ones who have the money people behind them. Only the ones who have sold their soul to the big money. Those are the ones who are going to be on the ticket. So if money can influence an election, then democracy fails. And you know what? If religion, and I don't care if you're talking about Judaism in Israel, I don't care if you're talking about Islam, Muslim faith in so many of these Muslim countries, or in countries like the United States that still want to throw God in everybody's face. They want to put it in their Pledge of Allegiance. When the Pledge of Allegiance was first written, there was no one nation under God. That got added later. It wasn't even part of the original text. And of course, they got to stick it on their money. Oh, even by the way, even in the Star Spangled Banner, fourth verse, what's it say? And this be our motto: in God is our trust. Yeah, separation of church and state, my ass, right? Exactly. So, I mean, as long as we can just again. Here was my my meme. It says two things that cannot coexist with democracy are capitalism and religion, and I meant dominant religion. When money can buy elections, legislation, and preferential treatment, and the God card can be played on every social issue, democracy fails. Look, that's my quote. That's not I'm just I wrote that off of listening to Dr. Nawal El-Saadawi, again, Egyptian activist, who said, "Look, her country's not democratic. She fights for freedom. That's what she fights for. But any country that is operating under a theocracy, and when you consider the influence of the religious right in the United States, then clearly there is a problem that church has such an influence on who gets elected, on what laws get passed. I mean, the fact that we're still having this abortion debate, I mean, it's just crazy after this many years of this stuff. I mean, the fact that you've got, people who get elected who want to invoke, God and religion above science. And I'm not saying science can be, isn't always accurate. But I mean, when you talk about things like climate change and and you get people say, "Oh no, it's just God's will. It's just God's will. It doesn't matter if we rape the planet. It doesn't matter what we do to the environment. Whatever's going to happen is just God's will." Look, I'll give, credit to Pele for, whatever's happening in Hawaii with lava. But when man is destroying the ocean, yeah, thank you, Japan, for Fukushima. But we've got islands of plastic, floating around the Pacific as well. We've got, mountains that have been destroyed. Why? Money. And you know what? All of this stuff gets justified with religion, including, even when we get back to the racism. Racism is born out of religious dogma. I mean, and frankly, all of the major religions assert that there's one true and just people and everybody else is somehow beneath them. That's what religions do. They create hierarchy. The monarchy, the royal, the royal wedding, right? Another great one, right? This idea that God chose a certain family to rule over others. I mean, how big a lie is that? That Queen Elizabeth and Charles and Harry and William, and that these guys are somehow chosen by God to be a royal family? And people still believe in this stuff and are enamored by this stuff? And somehow they think, because a mixed race woman becomes a princess, a British princess, did that just end racism, kind of like the black president did? Yeah, not so much. Not so much. If I'm a black man, I'm saying, well, another one got away. We lost another one to a white man. That in my view. But no, I mean, so again, these are some of the things that I'm putting up on Facebook and on Twitter to have a conversation. I think people have to realize, I'm not just saying that capitalism is a failure. I mean, somebody posted, well, would racism exist without capitalism? Oh, sure. Racism can exist without capitalism. There are very nationalistic, anti-capitalist peoples that are deeply embedded with racism. Well, anyway, hey, look, I will be back on Friday here. On Thursday, I'll be doing my show in New York. You can catch me on WBAI.org, streams live. Plus, I'll be Facebook live streaming, so you can catch the show then. And on Wednesday night, again, I'll be screening Drunk Town's Finest, the film by Sidney Freeland, part of the Sundance Film Project, the native film project out of the Sundance Film Institute. So we'll do that on Wednesday and my show on Thursday. So we'll, of course, be back here on Friday as well. Thanks for listening. And, hey, keep the conversation going. Yahweh.
Sun comes up man.